Minimize procrastination and take control of your time to reclaim the hours lost to charting and admin work, shifting the balance away from work and back towards life. Dr. Russell Ramsay is a psychologist specializing in the assessment and psychosocial treatment of adult ADHD. He has lectured internationally and is widely published. His books include CBT for Adult ADHD, that's CBT, not CBD, Non-Medication Treatments for Adult ADHD, the Adult ADHD Toolkit, Rethinking Adult ADHD, Adults with ADHD, and the Adult ADHD and Anxiety Workbook. You can see where I'm going here. Just like our conversation with Dr. Cheryl Chase a few weeks ago, this is to help all of us be more efficient, not just those with ADHD. The skills apply to everyone. And this is another two-parter because there was so much great information. So make sure you tune in next week for the second half. You're listening to Succeed in Medicine, the show for practicing physicians who want to master the parts of their career and life that med school never prepared us for. From interpersonal skills to career navigation to the essential information every physician needs. I'm Dr. Bradley Block, and in every episode, we bring you brass tacks advice and immediately applicable insights from world-class experts so you can feel prepared wherever your MD takes you and build a life in medicine that's sustainable, rewarding, and actually worth all those years of sacrifice. Dr. Russell Ramsay, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Brad, thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
You've had clients or patients rather that are physicians. Have you seen any common pain points amongst them?
Probably number one, it's a really challenging position you guys are in. And so it'll sound cliche, but striking that balance between doing everything you want to do and need to do professionally, like patient care, keeping up with documentation, all the extra work, but also having some semblance of balance with a personal life and self-care. So really there's a very challenging choreography in there, and it's really easy for things to get out of balance, especially falling behind on all the professional obligations. So there's, very often people are talking about, I know I have this documentation, but I have the phone calls, and then delegating, not enough, and just getting caught in this vortex, and then spending more time later into the evenings or weekends, maybe at the cost of family or the cost of finding somebody to start a family with, for all I know.
Starting a family with, they could take my advice because I was on Match.com when I first moved to New York as an attending, and it was like a part-time job. We could do a whole episode just on that. Not that
That's a good reframe for it because it talks about the effort. Things could be sometimes like a one-credit class or something like that, but they still need to be done.
But that hopefully was in some ways enjoyable for me, right? Like the dating process.
Yes.
Although it certainly can be tedious. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. But, I think one of the ways that we can help this balance is to stop doing all the things that we don't want to do, but sometimes sucks our attention, right? Like we end up down the rabbit hole on our phones or procrastinating or wasting time so that we can have more of a work-life balance if we are intentional with our time and doing the things that we really want to have our attention. So we're going to definitely get to avoiding procrastination. But before we do, you had mentioned, doing those things that we really don't want to do, but we have to do, like maintenance of certification or finishing our charts or calling back that patient that you're like, ooh, this is going to be a challenging conversation and I don't know how it's going to go and I'm not looking forward to it. All of those things that we know we need to do, but we really don't want to do. Let's start with that. How do we get ourselves to do it?
I want to start with that last one because I think it's a great example because one of the things in my work I've really expanded on over the last couple of years is this idea of social capital. The accounts we have with other people. Now, there can be our belongingness relationships, and this is a model I borrowed and fully cite Jonathan Haidt, the social psychologist. He wrote the book, The Anxious Generation, bestseller. But he'll talk about our belongingness relationships, our spouses, our families, our affiliations with friends, our affectionate relationships. And then there's the status relationships, which is our jobs, academics, including volunteer jobs. There's some sort of performance expectation. And maybe being part of a team where it's, do we provide something? It'd be sort of like being, what position do you play on a baseball team? Or, what's your role in a medical practice? What specialty? And, that balance between hopefully getting along well with others, but also doing your job well. So there's many ways we can fulfill those expectations. But within that domain, One of my goals for a lot of things is to make things very behavioral, actionable, even complex things. So we believe, and that's the cognitive part, yes, I believe I can do this. And there's also an emotional component. So that example of this is going to be a really tough phone call. They always ask questions. They always challenge me, whatever the experience is, with all respect to being on the other side, because I think we're all on both sides and sometimes. And if I was talking with you or another physician, it's like, tell me, what is your role for this phone call? What's your role with this patient? What's your role with the phone call? And the phone call you have to make, let's break it down into like a behavioral script. What do you have to say that if you get these, whatever it adds up to, 23 syllables out, you could check the box and say, I fulfilled my role. This is not to say you can't control what the other person thinks or says. To a degree, we can by being cordial, professional, those things, but it's no guarantee. But usually once we get engaged in it and started, and we say, I shared everything I needed to share, even if there's some back and forth and maybe at some point it has to be cut off, at the end of it, we can say, it was difficult, but I fulfilled my role. I can document it, move it on, and things like that. Now, hopefully, very often, this can also be if it's delegating, if this is supervising a trainee, having a discussion with a colleague, or if you're managing a practice, somebody you need to give feedback to. What is my role here? How can I say this in a clear, straightforward way that is still collaborative, but the message is clear? And allowing the other person, because we can say, I don't want the patient to be upset with me. I don't want the supervisee to feel bad about the feedback I'm giving. We don't want them to feel crushed, but we do want it to pinch a little bit if it's a corrective action. But that can still be done professionally. We need your documentation on time. At least this is one thing I learned at Penn, because if it's not completed after 30 days, it auto closes, then we lose the revenue, at least my past job. So that's something important, but it can be said in a clear behavioral way. So you communicate, and hopefully the other person, then their job is to take the feedback and adjust, ask for help, things like that. But even with the patient giving the feedback, you can say, at the end, I answered all their questions. They may not have liked the answers, but I fulfilled my role, and hopefully I can move on.
Okay, so like the small nugget of like, this is my job here. I need to communicate this information, and this is what I need to do. And then the rest of it is going to happen. So we've broken it down into like a bite-sized piece. Is it similar to like, I've heard the advice of if you want to start going to the gym, then sleep in your gym clothes and then just walk into the gym, and you can walk right out, but at least walk into the gym. And by making this phone call, you're like, I'm just going to make the phone call. I'm just going to communicate this little piece. And that's what I'm going to focus on right now. And then we'll see how the rest of the phone call goes, instead of assuming, based on our past experience, that you are going to get challenged a lot. There is going to be a challenging conversation, and they are going to, suck some of the essence out of your soul, which sometimes it feels that way.
And like I'll tell my clients, I'm statistically obligated to say from probability that all these things could happen.
Yeah.
But it's projecting into the future, and it's not totally off. It's not totally irrational. It's possible. Yeah. But in terms of getting started and going back to your gym analogy, yes, what it is, I think, is all these elements, putting on the gym clothes, even if we fall asleep in them and wake up in them, or whatever the case may be, we're starting the behavioral script of going to the gym. The first few steps, which is not going to the gym yet, but we've just exponentially increased the likelihood. I call it touching the task. We've touched something related to the task, put it on. My line I use, if I put air in my bike tires, I'll go out for a ride, because before I can think myself out of it. But if I put air in the tires, I'm touching the bike. I'm now having all the positive associations, and I'm much exponentially more likely to do that. So the other things you outlined, yes, the little steps, it's not fulfilling the task yet. I've had on my years, like people who say going to the gym right from work, but I'm tired, I'll go home, then I'll go back out. No, you don't. Most often, I'm a believer in behavior change, that you can do it, and there's ways to do it, but it's easier if you get there. And even though it's a tough commit right from work, you're tired or whatever, but if you can just get there. My whole career, I had one person said, I drove up to the gym, parked, turned off the engine, sat there, turned it back on, and left. But everybody else, even once you sometimes it's down to when you leave the office parking lot. If you turn left, you're going to the gym. If you turn right, you're going home. It's all about that left turn.
Momentum. We want to
Momentum.
just start momentum.
Yeah.
An object in motion tends to stay in motion.
There
So
you go.
point ourselves in the direction that we want to go, and then the rest will
Right.
likely carry you
Right.
towards that goal.
One of my favorite coping skills. So if people only take one away, this is one, and it's very portable. You can do it anywhere. It can be used for a bunch of ways, but for task initiation, it's called an implementation intention statement. It's an if X or when X. If I do behavior X, then I can do goal-focused behavior Y. If I put air in my tires, then I'll take my bike out for a bike ride. If I turn left out of the parking lot, then I can go to the gym and do my workout. And there's solid research behind this. Hasn't been studied in adults with ADHD, but children with ADHD, if I sit down at my desk, then I can do my math homework for 10 minutes. It has been found to be helpful. And the idea behind it is a goal-focused orientation. I want to go to the gym. I want to work out. That can be too broad and non-specific, too distal. But these crucial behaviors tied in with the pivot points, if you will.
Yeah.
And this could also be bringing it into some other topics. We'll probably get into it. If I can log on to the electronic records and open whatever it is, my most overdue note, my most recent visit, then I can at least start that note, if not finish it. But what's the phrase? Well begun is half done. Now, that's a little all or nothing for the cognitive therapist here, but it is one of those things that it takes the goal from being conceptual and now makes it tangible. I'm sitting there across from my records, and resignation is motivation too. Oh, all right, I might as well at least get this one done. And that is motivation. It's not the most inspirational thing, and it'd be an awesome title for a self-help book, but yeah.
We don't need an 80s montage going
Right.
on in the background while we're charting notes. We just need to get them done. It
Yeah,
doesn't need to be inspiring. But like you said, that's what we bill for. That's where the billing comes from. The billing comes from the charting, from the helping. Yeah.
A lot of what we're talking about here is taking a pause to consider, do I want to turn left out of the office or right, gym or home? And we're not talking, it's probably like swing votes in Congress. It's going to be 51-49, 52-48, but that's all it takes. And the resignation is motivation, and they're breaking it down into these actionable steps and something we can do, and also projecting ahead to our future self. How good will it feel when I'm at the gym or when I'm done with the gym? Just a little bit. But that pause allows, rather than going with the flow of what we might feel like doing in the moment, I'm tired, I want to go home, but am I so tired? Have I ever had to stop a workout? And sometimes just that pause. There's a great quote, something along the lines of, the one part I know, have memorized, is when you press a pause button on a machine, it stops. But when you press a pause button on humans, we start, because we have a chance to rethink, recalibrate, and reconsider what seems to be, okay, I'm headed this way, but wait, I've never had to stop a workout. I know I always feel better. Let me just get there, at least do whatever the one exercise is. But usually once we do that, we get through.
If you like this podcast episode, you're going to love the other shows over at the Dr. Podcast Network. For instance, Luxury Cruising. You know that moment? Sipping champagne, watching the sunset from your private balcony suite? Yeah, that's the magic of luxury cruising. Dr. Crystal Seditis takes you there on Luxury Cruising. Explore the world in style. From the most opulent ships to insider secrets on upgrades, she's your guide to traveling first class at sea. If you're dreaming of your next escape, this is the podcast for you. Search Luxury Cruising and subscribe. Your suite awaits. But sometimes we can't get to the gym because we've messed around after work. And this is something that happens to me. So my priority is to get done so I can get home and I can see my family and then, help my wife with the kids with their homework and with their after school activities. And yes, I've got my phone calls to make and I've got my charts to review and I've got my charts to finish, but I reward myself with my phone. And so I've just finished seeing patients for the day. I grab my phone to start scrolling because I deserve a mental break. I deserve it 100%.
Yes.
But then I end up down this rabbit hole. And before I know it, a lot more time has passed than I intended because the draw of the phone is just so satisfying and finishing charts is not. It's like a magnet stuck to my face. How do I do it for a reasonable period of time, whatever I determine that to be, so that I can give myself that mental break and yet still get back to my charting and leave in a timely manner.
One question would be whether you can do it for a little bit. Because there's been some research on adults with ADHD about distorted positive thoughts. I know this usually sucks me in, but I'll just do it for a minute this time, honest. Or working at the last minute is part of who I am, or things like that, and we all do this. Oh, I'll have a second ice cream cone. I'll work out twice as hard tomorrow, then later on. So part of it can be a pre-commitment of however you do it. When I'm done with my last patient, and now it could be some other sort of break that you do, like walking around the block, some sort of bounded physical break that is behavioral. So there's a beginning, middle, and end. This is probably also part of where it's also part of where the coffee break came from. And heaven forbid, I would never recommend this. I'm a lifetime non-smoker, but probably also the cigarette break, the length of time to smoke a cigarette. And I was presenting on this one time and said, I don't even know how long it takes. And somebody from the audience, deadpan, said 7.5 minutes. It's like, okay, I'll take your word for it. But that would be like, we'll go back to the coffee break or something else like that. It would be manageable. And being in motion also helps regenerate and refocus. And that would be tailor-made for if I open up one of the notes, one of the encounters, then I can work on this for the next 5 minutes. It also wouldn't be cheating if you go, I want to get home after I finish my last patient, and I can fiddle around with your personal life, but I want to go home right away and fulfill my role as father and partner. And again, this is the flexibility, but then maybe later in the evening or first thing next day you go, that's when I'll do my notes. But having some sort of pre-commitment plan for what you're going to do when. Now, some of this stuff will sound very basic, and it is. It's like I heard this nice phrase, it's not rocket science, it's harder. Because behavior change is difficult.
Yeah.
And so, that pre-commitment, what am I going to do when? And we have plans so we can change them, but it can help, especially if that's part of your overall plan of, I want to get home right after I see my last patient. And so I'll get to the office early, or first thing, dive into things with my if X then Y statement. But these are all self-regulation. How do we get ourselves to do things, including things like if we wake up to an alarm we set, that's self-regulation. It doesn't mean it all has to come internally.
Yeah.
We can set up our environment to be friendly, including getting to the office early before things start to catch up on work or do things into the evening.
Pre-charting,
however
in some practices that works. In mine, it doesn't happen to work, but I know a lot of physicians who do that type of pre-charting. And so then they're able to do it. And also at the beginning, I know for myself, at the beginning of the day, that's where cognitively I'm at my best.
Right.
At the end of the day, I used to be a night owl. I am no longer a night owl. I think residency flipped that for me. Mm-hmm. Because I know at the end of the day, if I'm supposed to work on something for my podcast, for my expert witness work or something like that, I'm not as good at it, not as efficient. I get much more distracted than if I'm doing it at the beginning of the day. So that makes sense. In terms of like motivating myself to get home on time because I get to spend time with my family, it's also doing homework with 3 kids with ADHD whose medication has worn off. So I'm not sure how appealing that really is.
That's true. No, it is hard. Yeah.
It's going to be hard. But, in terms of being able to help my wife and spend more time with my kid, that makes sense. And, I think for me in particular, taking a walk around the office would be a great idea, because that's also something we talk about on the show for the staff, right? Mm-hmm. Like it helps staff morale. So if a physician is making contact with the staff and talking and chit-chatting and socializing, right? And that leads to better staff experience, which leads to a better patient experience. And so then it gives me a cognitive break. It allows me to be a little social, and it helps the staff feel like, know that I care about them and what's going on in their lives. And it's really just a win-win all around. And also, again, the strength of our personal connections, of our social connections, is the best predictor of health and longevity. So it's just another connection.
Right.
So I think
it's a different
really
energy.
well.
It's like CrossFit in a way. It's like, okay, I was doing this, and yes, it's person to person, but your role with patients will be different than with the staff. So it's a different energy. So it's a little boost, during the day that just recharges the battery a little bit.
So one thing that also might prevent us from finishing our charts, among other things, is perfectionism. And that's something that I don't personally think that I struggle with, I guess it doesn't sound so good. I've always been okay with mediocre work, but I know a lot of my colleagues talk about this and struggle with this. Just in terms of that particular issue, is there anything like an underlying problem that leads to perfectionism?
Just like a lot of things, just like procrastination can have, many sources. It can be the absence of a plan. Okay, I'm just going to wing it. It can be having a plan and not doing it. So one thing I've seen, at least with adults with ADHD and perfectionism, it's a bit of a emotional self-protection with so many frustrations and failures. If I can get everything right, first draft, then I'm protected. And this comes up very often with difficulties writing papers, because then you spend 2.5 hours on the first 50-word paragraph, and you say, okay, I got 5 more pages to go. That, if you do the math, that's daunting. So there is a discussion on the source of the perfectionism. It could be also with physicians. It could be a bad experience at some time, like some sort of chart review or, some other matter where,
Complication.
Complication, something like that. So it can also be like an overcorrection in a way. And, I'm not going to be here saying, just be sloppy with the notes. You might have mentioned mediocrity, but reframe of that would be a fully competent note that is billable and can withstand any review. And it would be looking, asking somebody, where do you think you start losing time on this note? Is it thinking about what you're writing? Is it adding in every last detail?
Well, actually, we have a couple episodes on writing chart notes specifically. So for the listeners, if you're interested, they're with Sarah Smith and Junaid Niazi. We have a couple of episodes on charting and how to do it more efficiently. And one of the things that they talk about is chart notes is fine. They shouldn't be A+ chart notes. B. Yeah. Get a B on your chart note. It's good enough. But for those that struggle with the perfectionism, it sounds to me like telling someone with anxiety to relax, right? Like telling someone with perfectionism that work is okay. Is that similar, or is that something they can actually follow?
It would be two things. It would be looking at the work to see where do you think you might be overdoing it and finding out why. And it might be something like, I got burned on this before, so I'm extra sensitive to it. And then it could be a discussion, do you think you could dial it back? That happened, but was it an outlier? Was it whatever? But the other thing could be, what's in it for you to try to dial it down? And even, might quibble with my phrasing, dial it down, but still have a highly competent note.
How's it working against you? How it's working against you, you'll be incentivized to
cut it out. Would be getting home or getting your notes done sooner, or what are you losing? Yeah. What's the trade-off here? What's the point of diminishing returns? And you know what? Another thing, I think this shows up a bunch of different ways, but there's also perspective taking. If you can have access or see how somebody asks somebody else how they write their notes. Hey, how do you feel about that colleague? Who do you say, oh, they're a slacker? Or is it like, no, that's a highly competent note, but I can't do that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, why? And this goes back to students with the essays, where it can get really between thinking about it and typing it out between the fingers. There's a whole lot of processing and high cognitive load, and writing itself, including something like documentation, we have to be drilled to learn how to write, even like documentation. But our language, we acquire it in whatever language system we're embedded in growing up. So even talking aloud to ourselves about what we're writing, almost like transcribing ourselves, now that is taking action. So it's also approaching, and the taking action is also an emotional challenge, like if we're a little stressed by it or it has to be just right. But if we say it and we're also hearing it at the same time and saying, well, this sounds okay. And as we're, typing it in, or even I think some record systems you can.
Oh, yeah. Talk to text. If you're not using talk to text, you should be. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Things like that. And then if there's any editing you have to do to it, but it's another way to at least get a draft down and at least ponder, is this sufficient?
Yeah.
Rather than grinding over it. And this comes up a lot with emails too. What should be a simple 4-line email, and then it's spell check and grammar check and translating it into another language and back and all that stuff.
So I never thought of myself as a perfectionist, but now that you bring it up with the emails, this happens to me on emails on social media, where I feel like I'll have to be on my laptop. I can't do it from my phone because I won't get it just right. And then I'll end up postponing it. And then either I forget about it, and then it comes back and bites me because I never posted, or just the opportunity to communicate or have a dialogue on social media disappears. And so do you have like a more specific recommendation for those circumstances where you're like, it's a 4-line email, just do good enough. But at the same time, this is a professional relationship that I have with someone where I don't want it to be good enough. It doesn't have to be, like where I don't know the difference between good enough and perfect. I'm having trouble figuring that out.
Well, one thing would be if there's a correspondence or other correspondence you've had with colleagues or other people who you respect, it's looking at comparing, like, how are their emails? Is it anything? Now, you could have a colleague who is very complete and cites and has a reference list to their emails or whatever, but looking at how it comes across, because very often this gets into comparative thinking or going, well, that's fine for them, but I have to be better. And this can be a little bit of self-efficacy or self-esteem or, whatever we want to call it. Again, even if it's a colleague, where you're right, it has to be professional. And even professional emails will have spelling errors because people are busy. But it would be another define your role. And with that, just like with the patient phone call, we say, what words do you want to say?
The minimum message that needs to get it and do that.
Complete and clear, but without getting muddied. And also with all these things, now these are things some people use and find helpful, not everybody though. It could be like setting a timer for each documentation, setting a timer for writing an email, or a word limit, if you will. I think Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham, he limited himself to a certain number of words.
Oh yeah, I think there are 58 different words. I think one of his friends challenged him, right? Something like that.
And yes.
But it's another way, like, how can I express it in 25 words to say, hey, we'd like to have you on the show or something like that. Not everybody, or even if it goes over by a little, it's keeping to the spirit of the idea that hopefully it's quicker. And then it's a muscle that gets built up over time that I can be clear and straightforward and people respond without whatever we might feel we have to do. Hey, I know you're really busy. I'm sorry to bother you with this, blah, 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 blah.
It doesn't need to be Shakespeare. Stop putting that as your standard and just get the message. Complete is better than...
And you know what? A lot of this sometimes go back common reframes. One is normalization. Like things like procrastination, everybody does it.
Yeah, I've heard you say that. The relapse for procrastination is 100%. Yeah.
Right. And so it's going to happen. Just the U.S. population, I think 20% of people are judged to have problematic procrastination. So there's probably a high number of folks with ADHD, but that doesn't explain all of it. Another one is personal enoughness. This note is good enough, but also, you know what? I'm enough. I'm enough as a physician. I'm enough as a partner, a spouse. I'm enough as a parent. I'm enough as a pet owner, whatever it is. ADHD, one of the lines about it is it's a performance problem, not a knowledge problem.
Yeah.
And I'll tell people, if we're talking about procrastination and all I bring to the table is you need to start earlier, sue me for malpractice, please. Because you know that. But I think I'm pretty good at helping people understand how they procrastinate. Like, oh, you didn't plan, you didn't do this, you thought yourself out of it. So
wait, before you go any further, because procrastination is a whole nother rabbit hole. I still want to talk about procrastination and then daily planners and to-do lists. But we're already at 30 minutes. Dr. Russell Ramsay, thank you so much for your time. This has been part 1 of 2. Stay tuned for next week, where you all are going to get to hear the second half of this conversation, where we will be discussing procrastination and having your daily planners and to-do lists be as effective as possible without being overwhelming. Thanks for listening. I have a favor to ask. You listened to the episode until the end, which means either you fell asleep or you really liked the episode. So please write us a 5-star review, take a screenshot, and email it to me so I can send you a quick guide on how to earn patient trust in 20 seconds or less. Email me at brad@physiciansguidetodoctoring.com and feel free to suggest a topic or guest. I take your requests seriously. The views expressed on this episode are those of the interviewer and the interviewee and do not represent the views of their employer or even their significant other. Even though the magic of podcasting makes it sound like I'm talking directly to you, this is not a doctor-patient relationship, and this is not medical advice or financial advice or legal advice or really any advice. Thanks again for listening to Succeed in Medicine.